Chilly here with Sirius Tellus Moon hour, Sol day, and the moon is 90 degrees Gemini, Sun 90 degrees Cancer. So we have a closing semi-sextile between the Sun and the Moon. Mars Aldebaran, ascendant midheaven ruled by Mercury, Mercury retrograde 21 degrees Cancer. So in the background, I have been looking at Security Council decision 1325, which originated or dated 31 October 2000. And 2030, we're going to have the exact Saturn return. 2028 already, we're going to have the Saturn return by ingress to that decision that's becoming more and more prevalent. And since it's a Security Council decision, it means that it gives the right to militarily invade a country that has been a part of violation of girls' and women's rights in armed conflict. That's the meaning of a Security Council. Security Council is the only council where there is actual military decision. For example, when there was a decision to attack Russia, which is a part of the P5, Security Council 1325 basically could have been a legitimacy to invade even one of the P5s. Okay, there was sexual boundary violation at the frontiers, and that has activated NATO. Now, of course, that includes any false flag or any people who would cause such an attack together, and people who would use that as a card. Now, Saturn return is going to be with Saturn 28 degrees Taurus. Which is going to prompt a declassification. People are going to have to declassify the classified technologies that operate on the consciousnesses of people. Here with the Epstein dossiers, we saw it very particularly, and the fluid of the cases that have standing. By the way, all the cases have standing, but the even against President Trump is beginning to arise, which already counts for 1325. Now, this would cause the only line of defense for Trump without repeating offenses would be to call to declassify classified technologies, which could have, due to their nature of nervous system hack, affected his behavior as a sovereign, sane, healthy president. Ketu Rao, 18 degrees Capricorn and Cancer. Jupiter, Aldebaran. Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde. Both tell us that there's going to be an innovation on the structure of litigation. Of course, the inherent nature of sexual offenses does not allow for the eloquence or the standing cases in the usual form. And we already saw around the B2, the right of the public to know takes precedence over any claims for name or, and at the same time, the classified technologies that interfere in the consciousness of sovereign, sane, healthy people. Which I reiterated, the onset was the rituals that affected infants worldwide. Now, my prediction is that by 2030 we're going to see Security Council 1325 enacted, enforced, which is why I take that. How should I say that? Which is why I discuss about it in advance, that the line of defense is going to be along these lines. Uranus 16 degrees Aquarius, Neptune 3 degrees Aquarius, Lilith 27 degrees Capricorn, Sun 8 degrees Scorpio, Mercury Scorpio, Mars Alkaid. Mars Alkaid can be destruction of cities, but also litigations regarding the inflammation effect that happens with sexual boundary violation, but also with the classified technologies that create interference in the nervous system and the consciousness of a person that is the perpetrator at the time. Um, as we are approaching the question of transhumanism, the core of consciousness beyond an analogy is also being revealed, and the rule is as the rule is. Now with Marcel de Baron that is on that, conjoining that Jupiter, that material win, or the win over the resources, can only be a win and not a pious win when we honor the feminine. So, okay, it's a challenging thing, because it's kind of like, to get there, we have to acknowledge all the things that generate, and the intense effort that was dedicated to that, to try to have basically a win over the resources through violating and making look like the victim, and making it look like the victim is a perpetrator. It's in fact the entire modus operandi for um, and now, by the way, I saw it during the Me Too, and I began to address that as the rites of passage, that basically the men were violated within their societies before it became a Me Too, which we saw it towards the women. But the core concept was honoring the feminine that was violated, because the boys were considered the feminine, the conquered people were considered the feminine, and then because they were children that were birthing children, then the fear of the feminine. Think about an infant or a child supposed to be raised by a violated child who's aggressive, controlling, helpless, and all at the same time, creating all kind of fear from the feminine, stereotypes on the feminine, and then even being gay would not be an escape from addressing the honoring of the feminine. Yes, it's kind of like, oh, people are gay, people are gay, people are straight, people are straight, but it's also they anyway gonna have to honor the feminine. By the way, same with lesbian. When lesbian women, for example, don't honor the feminine, or blame the woman for not being present when a man is not safe for her, then they are basically committing the same offense of the aggressors. 2030. Let's take a look at the chart for 2030, which is going to be the return, the Saturn return. So 2030 already having the nodes in their Sagittarius Gemini place with Rahu in Sagittarius, and Saturn will go through beta Persei before ingressing to Gemini. By 2030, we're supposed to have a lot of African countries in NATO. Just things 1325 enacted in Africa. It's like we're gonna have Jupiter 22 in Scorpio retrograde, Saturn Mars Lilith. I was looking at the Sun Saturn Mars Lilith, Chiron 13 degrees Taurus, Mercury 2 degrees Taurus, Venus 18 degrees Aries. So women fighting for their rights, that evil that was done to them. Mars Lilith Saturn Sun. Wow, this is, except for an outer planet, we did it's not a stellium, it's a stellium on a point of that return. So it's going to be Mars Lilith. You're going to be addressing the rape of the boys that were feminine. The feminization ritual is everything gives that. And the religious aspect, because Scorpio 22 in Taurus. The religious aspect, see, I think the assassin as the feminine. Only now I get that. The assassin, let's say the assassin politician or the assassin journalist, is seen as the feminine. This is why it looked like when women were trying to come out of violence and the police was doing nothing. Police was like, no. Again, I said the police, I'm not saying the entire police, but it's enough for one infiltrated to shut down the police. The only antidote would be to honor the feminine. Uranus Ketu in Gemini, Middle Decan, Rahu in Sag, Moon Rahu, Pluto 12 degrees Aquarius already, in the Middle Decan of Aquarius. Now, this is still not too far from beta Persei, meaning that not enforcing 1325 would be dead bodies upon dead bodies. In fact, I remember when Mark Rutte, I called it ingress to NATO, he was addressing Putin, and he said, well, Putin wants a big war. If he wants a big war, he will have to fund it. And he said, we're not afraid of war, but it's going to be bigger than the First World War, which is obvious. This thing could prompt such a thing. But the only way to avoid a nuclear demolition is to honor the feminine. And that calls for the classification of these technologies and for the discontinuation of these patterns, because here the bodies upon bodies, again, it's not an outer planet, but its own beta per se, which tells me that this could be of Saturn cycle nature. But the effect, but its economic effect, the um, entire effects of whatever will be, will have a Saturn cycle nature. Um, Uranus at Gemini, Mercury in the beginning of Taurus, Sedna would probably be a couple of degrees into Gemini. Um, Chiron square Pluto. Chiron square Pluto in the background. The wound of embodiment when it comes to the interference of technology and occult in embodiment in the pre-linguistic phase. Everything that I've been talking about. Um, and Neptune, middle decan, Aries. Mars ruling over Neptune, Saturn ruling over Pluto. Okay, this is an interesting one because we don't have we don't have an outer planet. For example, when Uranus was on Beta Persei, the Israeli-Palestinian frontier began to expand towards Iran. Not the actual expansion, but the one-day showdown where the entire country was covered with shit ton of missiles that were coming from Iran. That was Uranus Beta Persei with all of it, but we had a stellium and Beta Persei, we had Jupiter Uranus, we had Mars, we had Venus, we had Mercury, we had stupid people that made a talisman of that. and now, um, we're trying to prevent the world. We're trying to prevent the world war because it was in a bisextile with Pluto in the end of Capricorn and Neptune in the end of Pisces, and Saturn was next to Neptune. Anyway, um, now with this one, it doesn't look like an outer planet, but we have two outer planets around this point. Saturn ruling over Pluto, Mars ruling over Neptune. And Mercury ruling over Uranus is in the beginning of Taurus, still ruled by Venus. So basically, all the rulers of the outer planets are in Venus. Venus is in Aries, which is a sign of war, and Mars is with Saturn and Lilith at the 29 degrees Taurus. Jupiter ruling over Rahu and the Moon is 22 degrees Scorpio retrograde. So it can be some sort of a response, something that sparks a response. Um, I have addressed how should I say it? Peter Thiel's addressing the Pope was, hey, he's a commie. Hey, he's a commie is not enough to prevent Inquisition. Addressing Genesis, the rape in Genesis, addressing honoring the feminine, both on a scriptural level, on a religious and a secular level, and because in the past we had either people lived well but didn't address Genesis, or people converted and then were massacred anyway. And then people say, oh, don't assimilate. Doesn't have, not assimilating is not suffice. To actually honor the feminine. Now, And when we say the feminine, it's also the boys within the secret societies, the children, the conquered people, the assassin people. Um, Now, here's the thing about China. They have it in the culture that it's important how a person makes a win, and even if he dies not succeeding or not winning, but being true to his way, is being honored. Now, I know that there's various. When I say China is a very big, redundant declaration, okay, there are also other classes of China and other. Um, but this is something cultural that is again not suffice because we also have to honor the feminine. It all comes down to that. This is why there's so people talk about patriarchy or misogyny. It's nothing to do with that. It's a yin and yang. And when people are in a situation where they dishonor yin, they deplete yin, so they basically undermine themselves. They basically undermine themselves. I was speaking about this around the aftermath of the Me Too, and I was giving an example of world wars and the yin yang lack of balance there. Um, so not enforcing or attempting to dodge Security Council 1325 can result in way more casualties, and then eventually having to instill the, everything with technology and esoterics that support basically will and consent. Um, like I said, or be overtaken by AI, like without people being at the control board of the AI. Even the people that are behind the bigger development of AI, they say AI can completely take us over, and they're being authentic. They'll say, yeah, but they did that. Yeah, they did that, but it's true. Funded by BlackRock. A classified project budget. Um, but this is kind of a scary Saturn return, I have to admit. Kind of a scary one. Um, I know I know at least one Rahu and one midheaven and one sun. One particular lot, let's say, that are pinpointed by this stellium in Taurus. Couple of midheavens. Um, yeah. Certain Mars and certain Neptune. Um, Israel's Chiron is next to that Jupiter. And again, they're gonna be according to declassify those cult occult technologies. Um, it's gonna be the only line of defense. And um, So let's just say one of the smartest things that Ruta did was reiterating Decision 1325. That with the classified projects makes him very literally bulletproof. Because we can't address the questions of funding or the sovereignty in the face of United States, if you saw my post, without tackling this little big paperclipy deal. Um, and not addressing that or trying or attempting to, let's say, this point squares last decan of Aquarius, because attempting to dodge that is that bodies upon bodies. Like then a Balgari alone won't be able to tend to that without honoring the beta per se. For example, the core of what people see as psychosis is sexual boundary violation. Sexual boundary violation causes inflammation, causes cancer. The entire bubble is basically, with this one being popped in very bluntly, it would be impossible to defend the earth without honoring the feminine. Not partially. And it's not going to look like World War One. If you're talking about the Saturn cycle, we're talking about reaching into Pluto sextiling everything that calls it sextile. Just gonna still sextile Neptune, and then move from that in 2030s, move from that towards the Neptune square Pluto, which means we're no longer going to have Gladio with us either. Now, NATO was a part of, it was within the bisextile of Gladio. To continue with the alliance has to tackle all the things that I mentioned. To continue with any other, then that any other would have to appease that. To not appease that, boom, 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 boom. Like, don't expect the bunker to stand to Krakatoa. Don't expect the bunker to stand to the amount of stuff that's gonna drop. As an onset, is the meeting of Saturn is the elder, Mars is the younger, Venus is the women's, Mars is the man, Lilith is the woman that will not be subjugated within all of them, is the feminine that will not be subjugated within all of them. Saturn ruling Pluto. Pluto is the technology, is the AI, is the occult. Astrological or not, or scientific, or whatnot. Hemispheres. Mars ruling Neptune. It's the drugs, it's the altered states, it's the permeability and the duality of consciousness. It's the helpless phase that looks like omnipotence. It's the addictive patterns that affect the consciousness and sense of self. It's the inflammation, the hidden inflammation. It's the solipsistic experience of the self. And it's the head of the baby. Very simply put, the head of the baby, the head of the infant. This is not one to be taken lightly. Anyway. Um, something about the egoic things that happen. Well, I believe Ketu Magha is going to tend to a lot of those, and with the remembering that Aquarius squares Taurus. We're gonna see that with the Chiron square in Pluto. Um, and and understanding that Dana Balgeri cannot operate without appeasing Beta per se. Okay, but in fact, when in Afghanistan they got the Afghani people, they basically weaponized Afghanistan. And then 9/11, they could do it by violating given weapon, violating given weapon. What will happen with that weapon? 9/11, when human trade is 9/11. That's the other thing. There's got people going to say, oh, it was a false flag. Well, of course, was George Bush not violated in those? So the weapon that was given with the violations that happened, supposedly as, yes, was used to what? To 9/11, the offenders. Now, the injection of, how should I say it? It was possible to take down Taliban with, but we can't do it with an army that's injected weird stuff to it.